for this 11th day of Vlogmas. First of all, holy shit. I'm actually kind of impressed with myself because I did not think I was going to make it this far into Vlogmas. I wasn't super confident because I'm like, I've never done this before. This is a lot. And you have to film like multiple days at a time. Otherwise you're not getting anywhere. So I'm going to be talking about my all-time favorite Christmas movie. And if you were watching this, you already know, and it is Carol. Now, I know this is probably a bad movie. I think there's probably going to be people who want to tell me that Carol is not a good movie, and there's lots of reasons why. I think I've heard people try and say stuff about Cate Blanchett specifically, about how she's like, I don't know. People don't seem to like her right now, and I'm not going to get into the details. I don't really, it is what it is. It's still a good movie. And obviously there's executive producers involved who are not great. So like there's that to consider. But I still think it's a good movie overall, and it's still my favorite. It's still my favorite Christmas movie. One of my favorite, I think, lesbian movies. But it is the sort of movie that like I really only watch it like towards the holidays and occasionally like New Year's. It's not a movie that I will go out of my way to watch a lot throughout the year. You know what I mean? So like, as much as I enjoy the movie, it's not something I'm going like out of my way to watch all throughout the year. Like it's very specifically a holiday movie to me. And what's funny is I don't think I've ever discussed my feelings about this movie. And I feel like I may have talked a little bit about it, but I've never done like a proper review. I've never like talked a lot about it. So this movie, for those of you who don't know, is based on a book by the author Patricia Highsmith called The Price of Salt. I actually wondered for a long time why it was called that. I think what's so funny is it feels like someone mentioned it in a video. Like I made a video and then someone answered it, but I feel like it might have been somewhere, maybe it was Tumblr. I was like, why is it called The Price of Salt? And it's a biblical reference. Now, Patricia Highsmith, for those who don't know, was, as I understand it, a closeted author in the 1950s. It was not like legal for her to write a book like this at that time. And she was best known for The Talented Mr. Ripley. She did kind of like a lot of, not like James Bond type of books, but like books that are very, like spy novels, basically. So she's not exactly the sort of person you would expect to write a book like this. And I think it only came out like well after her death that she had written it. It was one of those types of things. I tried reading the book at one point. And I mean, it's not bad. It's, pretty standard. It starts exactly how the film starts in terms of like, the two of them meeting at the department store, Carol Aird and Therese Belichek. So they meet at the department store that Therese works at. That is how the book starts. I think it's very interesting, because when there is, and this isn't like one of those cases, but I think when there is books where, the book is very well known, I think, and it's made into a movie, there's always this kind of thing about like, how close are they going to stick to the book? Are they going to stick close enough to the book? There's always kind of that worry, right? And I think this is a case where, at least from what I can see, for the most part, they do seem to stick pretty close to the book. I do wish, watching it is one of those movies that I do wish it had kind of a happier ending, but I guess, the film came out, I feel like the film came out like at least a decade ago, like probably 2012, in that era. So like, I guess I'm asking for a lot to have it, have a happy ending, right? I guess that is asking quite a bit of movie studios in the 2010s. But, I don't know. I always hope for a happy ending. And I always realize that, like, there is that whole, like, I mean, nobody died, so I guess I should consider that a happy enough ending. And I think, I'm not sure, I'll have to look all this up post, because it's not really something, when you're doing videos like this, it's not really easy to look up information while you're filming. But I believe the film won quite a few awards, and it's kind of, something about it. I hate to say this, because I know we've kind of like, I think we've moved past this idea in more recent times, but it is the sort of film that I think people would call Oscar bait, right? It's tragic, it's beautiful, it's, gay, but not too gay, so it's not going to alienate people. It's very much, I don't know. It's just, it's a fun movie. I think there's a lot of like very tragic films, right, that are, queer centric, at least of the past, few decades. There are a lot of tragic films. And so this one, I mean, again, like I said, nobody dies, and that's already like a really positive note. I've certainly wrote more character death in things that I write than, some of the films today, which is, look, it's a good thing. We need to not have, we need to move away from bury your gays. We need to move away from, killing characters off just for the sake of it, or just for the drama, or just for the storyline, whatever. I mean, I do think, like, characters sometimes die for the story, and that's okay. That's a whole other argument. But anyway, look, this is a very, it's not a heartwarming story by any means. But it is, I think, a very cute story all the same. And of course, we love everyone's favorite lesbian mom. Oh my God, I can never think of her name. I can always see her face, but I can't think of her name. Oh my God, she plays her best friend. Oh, okay. So Carol came out in 2015, which is so funny to me. I still was right that it's the 2010s, but it wasn't as long ago as I thought. It's only going to be 10 years next year, which is so great. Okay, Sarah Paulson. That's the name I couldn't remember. So it's only going to be, no, that can't be right. 2020, yeah, 2025. It's going to be 10 years next year. Oh my gosh, Becky. So I was right, though. I thought it was about a decade ago. So yeah, I mean, it's by today's standards, I think, because the way we look at things has changed so drastically, I don't think it maybe works for everyone, but I think it still works in general, right? I think it's still a good movie by most standards, I think actually, we see moments where it's kind of like, okay, is Carol's husband an asshole? Is he an okay guy? I mean, it seems like he kind of knew going in who she was and what she was about. Like, she does say that at one point, like, you knew when you married me who I was, and I think that's very fascinating because, of course, that had to have happened. So, like, I think there was definitely a thing, right, where he knew what was going on. He knew who his wife was. And, like, I imagine you have to, but she got married, she had a kid, she did the things that you do, especially in the 50s. There's something so glamorous about this movie, too, right? Like, I think Carol's style is very, very glamorous. Is it dramatic? Yes. Is it, like, very, goes from 0 to 10 in, like, 5 minutes? Yes. It has everything, right? This is a film that very much has everything you could possibly ever want and more, and is so dramatic. I think this movie has absolutely everything. It's so much fun, right? There is just something about this movie that I think is a lot of fun. And this isn't like a review proper. Like, this is just kind of like me talking about the movie and why I like the movie too. Because I think this movie, it's just, like I said, it's just fun. And I think we need more fun in the world. You know what I mean? I almost have to take this off. I'm going to be so cold, but I have to take this off because I do not want to get foundation on it. And this cream foundation, it doesn't fall, like it doesn't, come off or anything, but I just don't want to risk it. I will say, now this movie does have a problem that I find with a lot of movies concerning lesbians. And I've said this before, I think, on my channel. I think about this movie, actually, that I do take issue with the fact that a lot of these movies are set in like the 40s and 50s. You know, it's so, I can't remember the last time there was a show or a film that was like actively about queer women that was not set in the 50s. I feel like it's become very much the way that it has to be set in like the 40s, the 50s. You know, there was Ratched, which I loved. Ratched was such a good show. I'm so sad they canceled it. But, you know, that was set in the 1940s. There was, you know, like, what was that other show? Well, obviously Carol. There was that, well, I think Pink Ladies had a little bit of queerness in it, but there was the remake of the baseball movie that I cannot think of right now. Nope, there's no crying in baseball. There was the remake of that, which was a TV show, which had a lot of queer characters, which is great and makes sense. But, like, how on earth, A League of Their Own, how on earth, you know, again, it's set in the 40s. So, like, or like 40s or 50s. And it's like, why is this the only representation we get? Why do we only get representation? Or like, you know, side characters on fucking, you know, the Sex and the City remake that nobody's watching. Or, you know, the Queer as Folk remake that nobody watched. Or the, you know, L Word remake that nobody watched. Like, you know, I don't know why it's so hard to get modern stories about queer women specifically that people will watch and that like aren't kind of just terrible. And honestly too, like when we are characters in a show, like something like, you know, Hell of a Boss, I guess, you know, Has Been Hotel is what has Charlie and Vaggie. I find it hard to care about them, and I hate that. Do you know how much I hate the fact that I don't like even really appreciate the like love between them? Like I it's fine, but it's not like, it's not really the focus. It's not really something that I can enjoy as much as I want to. And it's like, come on now. Like, even when it should be more of a thing, it doesn't feel like it is. And I think that's probably why, like, I think for gay male love stories, right? We don't have to, they're so much more common in media. So we don't have to do this thing where we're, you know, reading between the lines. Whereas I think, you know, as we're seeing with Wicked, you know, all these many years later, we're having to read between the lines again. You know, we're having this media where we have to look for the very, you know, undercover shit because it's not explicit. I mean, with The Wicked, it is a little bit more explicit, but like in most cases, it's not really that explicit, right? Glinda is very much a disaster femme, and I relate to that. Who loves the color pink, which I also relate to. Although, let's be fair, let's not go for the book Glinda because she is a little problematic. A lot problematic, but, you know. And it's sad because it's, even in modern media, it is so rare for, you know, two women to be together. And when it does happen, it just feels like, I don't know, somebody who's writing it really isn't giving us what we want. It just doesn't feel like, I don't know, I'm just so seldom impressed, I guess. And maybe that's just something with me. Maybe that's my own damage, that I'm just not impressed. Because it just doesn't feel like that impressive. Like, I don't know how else to say it. And so I end up being like, okay, well, I'm glad that these characters are canonically out, but like, I have a hard time caring. And that makes me feel bad. Because you know, again, I want to, you know, it's a catch-22, right? Because it's like, if you are a queer person who doesn't support queer characters in media, then writers just aren't going to include them because they don't feel like they have to, because, well, even queer people don't like this, so like, why should we include it? And like, I don't agree with that. I just feel like they need better people writing it. You know? And that's just what it is. I think sometimes, you know, if you let... I'm not talking about Has Been or Hell of a Boss. I'm just talking like in general. A lot of shows, you know, you need more people in the writing room who have these experiences that can write this in a way that feels, I don't know, real, feels enjoyable. I don't know. And you know what's weird is like, this is getting off track of Carol, but you know, that's how I do. I was thinking about something like this, but I was thinking about like Queer as Folk, right? And that came out like 20 years ago, 25 years ago. But I feel like for some reason, you know, there's a lot that's not great about that show. There's a lot that doesn't age well about that show. But I do feel like, you know, Melanie and Lindsay in that show are so much more likable and feel more, for the most part, until like the end, feel more in love than a lot of these other queer characters we see. And I saw, what is it, right? Is it Rowan Ellis? Someone that I don't necessarily follow, I kind of follow like on the periphery, just did a video about how good queer representation is boring and like that's kind of a problem. And I'm so fascinated by this idea because I don't know if I agree, but at the same time I don't disagree, because I do feel like, you know, as representation has gotten better, let's say, or more ubiquitous, I don't know, I feel like it is a little bit boring. You know, and that's kind of unfortunate. I feel like, you know, on the one hand, it's great that queer representation is more common. Not that much more common. Like, let's be real, it's still not anywhere near where it should be. But it is more common generally, and I appreciate that. But at the same time, a lot of it is kind of boring. And it's kind of like, I don't know, I have a hard time enjoying it. And maybe that's just something, like I said, maybe that's just some damage with me, that I have a hard time enjoying it. I want people to be happy. I want these characters to be happy. I don't want them to be suffering or whatever. But I have such a hard time enjoying a lot of like modern queer-esque media. Because I'm just like, it's not, I don't know. It's just not fun. I don't know what to say. I don't know what, again, that's probably something more about me. And like, I guess the drama of Carol is part of what makes it interesting, right? Like, there is so much drama going on here. There is so much trauma going on here. You know, she's a woman in the middle of a divorce. Her husband is, you know, is kind of an asshole. Like, I think by the standards of the day, you know, he does do some things that are really terrible by today's standards. But I think by those standards, I don't know, you know, it's not the worst. And he eventually does, you know, relinquish and kind of not be an asshole, or at least that's what's implied. I don't know if that's kind of how it goes. But, you know, I don't know. It's very, very interesting, right? And I just feel like, you know, obviously I don't necessarily want that level of drama for every film and every piece of queer media. Obviously, I don't think it should have that drama. And it shouldn't even, you know, this is the other thing too. I don't even necessarily want with queer media for the drama to be like, oh, coming to terms with your sexuality and coming out. And it's this whole, you know, long drawn out thing. I don't even necessarily want that. I just want something interesting. And I feel like sometimes it's just not. Like, okay, right, let's talk about this, right? If we're going to go the Hell of a Boss and Has Been Hotel route, right? So you've got something like Stolas and Blitz, right? Which is such a fascinating case study in like a relationship where two people clearly are into each other. They're kind of being dumb about it. You know, it's a whole big thing between them, right? Where it's like, you know, they're going to get together eventually, but they're kind of just both being so dumb about it. and both being so ridiculous. And, it starts off very much a relationship of convenience. It starts off with, oh, that's cute. It starts off with both of them kind of denying how they really feel. It's all of that, right? And then, of course, as the show grows, we get to see more. We get to see kind of how they got together and all of that. And of course, their love story has blossomed as it has now, where it is now. And I think that is something that's so, so interesting. But it's not ever this, even though Stolas is just kind of coming to terms with his sexuality because of the nature of being born into royalty, and he wasn't able to be who he was before, right? For Stolas, it was very much like trying to figure himself out, finally be able to be open and out and comfortable with himself, right? That was very much the story. And then it was very much also, Blitz trying to become comfortable with, being in love with someone for the first time, right? So that is the story there. And I think that's so interesting and so well done. As opposed to in the one lesbian storyline we have, which is, or I should say queer female storyline we have, which is between Vaggie and Charlie in Has-Been Hotel, they're already a very much in love couple. And when they do have a fight about the fact that Vaggie reasonably hid that she was an angel, it's very short-lived. It doesn't go anywhere. And the thing of it is, the tension at no point in Hell of a Boss is, at no point is the tension specifically about someone coming out. It's never a moment of, figuring out your sexuality or having to come out and do all this stuff, which I'm grateful for because I think that's kind of overplayed, right? I've certainly written it. A lot of people have written it. I think it's very overdone. This idea of gosh, so cold. I think this idea is very overdone at this point. It's very overplayed. We know very well the storyline of coming out and trying to figure it out. Or even a storyline of young people. I think there's a lot of queer stories that revolve mostly around young people. I appreciate when queer stories revolve around older people. As an older person, I mean, I am still pretty young, but as a person in my 30s, even we don't get our stories told right now. It's very much 19, 16, what a high school age. And that's fine. That's great. I would have loved that as a high school age person. But I do want to talk about stories of people my age too, right? 30s, 40s, whatever. On the one hand, I appreciate that these stories, something like Charlie and Vaggie, are about a older queer couple. That's great. That's lovely. But there's just, I mean, if you compare the two stories, I don't know. It's just not as enjoyable. And even something like Oz and Fizz, right? Their romance, I think, is fun because it's very it had to be hidden and forbidden, and you love Fizz so much, you want him to be happy. And maybe it's just that I don't like Charlie as much as I want to. And I know that's gonna rub people the wrong way, me saying, again, this is supposed to be a video about Carol, but I kind of got off track because, hi, hello, welcome to the channel. But I think Charlie is very naive, right? Charlie is someone that you want to root for, and I think you want to love and appreciate, but she's extremely naive with her ideas. She's not to sound like Alistair on Maine, but she's very naive with her ideas. She's very naive with what she wants for all of hell. I think it doesn't make a lot of sense. I've had my own kind of complaints about this kind of storyline anyway, but there is something to be said about Charlie's character and why does she think that heaven is going to be this great thing when they kicked out her father. I don't quite get that. That's a whole other thing that has never made sense to me. I'm not going to go down that road because we will be here forever. But I'm just going to say, it's very bothersome to me. And it's very confusing to me, why this is the case. But even ignoring all of that, right? Even ignoring how strange all of that is, to me personally, I just, and again, maybe it's that I don't find Charlie to be as compelling of a character as Blitz or Stolas or Vizzarali or Osmodeus. Like, I don't find her to be that compelling of a character. And Vaggie, I think, is a compelling character just because she's kind of an asshole, but very clearly cares about Charlie. While I don't necessarily feel the vibes for the two of them, I do feel like Vaggie very clearly cares about Charlie and wants to protect her because she is like this very innocent person and is very naive and would take in a stranger who she has no idea anything about her, and that's why they've been together for so long, and she didn't know she was previously an angel. Like, she met her on the street during the extermination and was just like, yeah, we're dating now. So maybe if we got more of their story, maybe if we got more of like what makes them an interesting couple, I don't know. But I just feel like, again, I'm having to do all the legwork here. And it's just like, I just don't know if I find them compelling enough. And again, maybe it's more Charlie that I don't find compelling enough.